Yeah.
Welcome everybody. Good evening. Welcome to the Lake Bluff School District 65 Board of Education special meeting, August 20, 2013. Christine, could you please take a roll call?
Yes, again. Charlotte.
Here.
Gotcha.
Here.
Engineer here.
Yeah.
Darren.
Present.
Robson.
Here.
Reiner.
Here.
Hey.
Here.
All present.
We have a quorum, so let's get started. First thing I want to talk about is public comment. We welcome comments from anybody in the audience, and we reserve the right to be a little bit flexible about how we do that meeting to meeting. Just so everybody knows, we're gonna, if anyone wants to address the board now, they're more than welcome to. Just come up, state your name and your address. We will offer a time at the end of the meeting, and depending on how it goes, we may offer, if there appears to be some question in the audience about something that during the presentation, we may or may not allow for a question or two during the meeting. Just that we have to play by ear depending on how the meeting goes. So does anybody need to address the board tonight? And since nobody needs to do that, we're going to move right to action items. And this is very brief. Just to summarize, we have some employment. We're going to be, we wish to employ 3 new people. There's a Julie Hoffman at LDES, who's going to be a new kindergarten teacher. There's a Diana York at the elementary school, who will be a 0.5 FTE RTI teacher, that's response to intervention, and a 0.5 FTE kindergarten teacher. And also a Barbara Ferenz is a 0.4 FTE art teacher. She's a rehire. And they're all effective August 19th. So can I have a motion to approve personnel recommendations as attached?
So moved.
Second? Second. Any questions, comments, concerns?
I have a question, and I know, Jean, that you sent an email regarding the plan for the kindergarten staffing, but I'm sure I didn't read it closely enough, but I guess I'd like to understand orally maybe now what the plan is for where the children are going to be. We've gone up 25 children from our kindergarten class last year, which is just stunning. I think 25 at last count. I don't think our demographics guy that we had in last year would have predicted that. Certainly didn't predict the downturn last year as steep as it was, nor would he have said it was likely to upturn either. But it's a large group of kids, larger than the last few years, and so I'd like to hear more about what the current plan is.
What we are, first of all, we see this as a good sign because we know that many families move to the community so their kids and their families can start kindergarten. So usually and typically that's a sign that this group of students will move kind of as a group through our school system. So that's the good news. It has been interesting watching our enrollment every day. And I will share with you that we divided the kids up in these extra kindergarten classes. We have second language kids in all of them. Some of them we have to provide language instruction in their home language, meaning Spanish, because if we have over 20 Spanish speakers in LBES, which is why we hired 2 new kindergarten teachers that not only have regular ed experience, but they are also ESL certified, meaning that they can support second language kids. So our average class size in the full days was about 16.5. Knowing that that's going to be going up, our half day was at 24 yesterday, knowing that we still have to be looking at assessments and looking at our, what we call waiver or free and reduced list.
Okay.
But as I had shared with you in an email, we also now have an early childhood class that is again going up in size, and we have some very needy kids in those classes, and it looks like we may need an aide in that classroom. Right now, fortunately, the kindergarten is in the morning and the early childhood is in the afternoon. So until we finish our assessments and get the kids to school and get them situated, we have a full-time sub that we would have hired anyway because we've got a teacher on maternity leave who's spending time in those 2 classrooms. And I know that the half-day will go down a little bit and the full days will go up a little bit.
Okay, good. I was hoping you were going to say that. So, ideal world for a minute, right? We have 16.5 in 4 classes, full-day classes. So if you take 1.5 more in each of those classes, you get to 18 in the full day and down to 18 in the half-day. Any chance we're going to get anywhere close to that? Because
Well,
it's 6, right? 6 moved to half.
I would share something that it did take me a while to learn, and that is that kids do not divide evenly.
Yes, right.
So, but I think the other
Those
piece,
numbers are pretty good, the way I just
the
figured.
other piece is we got the half day to a great number, and then we have more students enroll,
Right.
and they wanted half days. So I think the worst case scenario, after the assessments are done and we've really looked at our population, we may wind up having to hire a full-time aide that would be dealing with the
But what
early
does that mean
child.
for numbers? Because we have, but 24 is too big.
It is too big, and it will be off of 24. But it also means that no matter what, we're gonna have the extra hands in the classroom, along with, don't forget, we have our ESL teacher that's going in and out for groups.
I understand. So is there any scenario under which my 18 would work? Or is that, are we not even considering 6 children? I know they're not going to divide this evenly, I understand that. But how many children are we currently considering for that half day, maybe moving to full day? Is it?
That, I mean, it could, I'd like to see 4.
Okay.
I'd like to see 4, but we don't have a good hold on that. And don't forget, the numbers are still changing every day.
Right.
So that's why I think as a parent and as an educator, I think it's important that we have this. If you've ever been in a kindergarten classroom, and I would advise all of you to go in for one day, because as you know, they're darling, but they are a lot. 18 in a class is a lot. And so in order for us to best meet their needs, we need to have the teacher and another adult really helping. The aide that we have in there right now is a certified teacher. I think the other issue though too that we're still waiting on is the results of Kevin's IEPs for his students.
I see.
So we're hoping it shakes out very nicely
Okay.
for us, but there's a lot of, it still all depends.
So even with an aide, I just want to be clear, even with an aide, 24 is too many.
It is, but we're still looking at having some of those kids move to full day. I can't tell you how many that.
Right, I understand.
Because they haven't been in for assessments and we don't have all the kids there yet.
But one way or the other, if we have more kids come in, or we don't have any of the ones in half day right now move out, your plan is to go ahead with 24 kids in there plus an aide.
That's the worst case scenario.
I mean, and it kind of is a worst case. We had several meetings about this previously where we said we're not going to do that again because it didn't work well. It's too many kids in a classroom. There was a lot of dissatisfaction about it, even with an aide. It's just too many bodies in the classroom.
At this point, we have no extra classrooms.
Yeah.
And I think the other point is, what's the exact class size that you would aim for? Because we have to remember, we haven't even started kindergarten, so we have to wait and make sure that they all come for assessment, that they all are assessed, that we look to see what their assessment results give us. There's a lot of variables that will play out in the next week or so. So I think right now we're doing the best we can with honoring that. I am very excited that we have as many kindergartners as we have.
Yeah, it is exciting.
So it's
First day is Thursday.
first day for assessments are Thursday and Friday for kindergartners, and the first day for them is Monday. So I will be giving you, there may be daily updates once they start, but we need to get the assessments in first. And I know Joanne Trajana spent about half the morning working with the kindergarten teachers, doing a lot of clustering for reading groups, and we have We actually have a reading block time that the kids in all the different grade levels are broken into small groups, and all the specialists go in, and so there's actually a lot smaller classes for the reading at this point anyway. That happens no matter what. So just reassure parents that we're on it, and we've got the aid secured until a decision's made, which is
Thank
maybe a good one for our kids.
Any other questions, concerns? Can we have a roll call vote, please?
Yes. Julie Gottschall.
Yes.
Richard Haig.
Yes.
Susan Ryder.
Yes?
Mark Berry.
Yes.
John Rosen.
Yes.
Chris Letchinger. Yes. Leanne Shalom.
Yes.
Motion's approved. And that is it for action items. Tonight, we're primarily focused on a discussion of bonds, and we're going to have Liz Hensey from William Blair give us a presentation on some additional bond scenarios that we've asked them to prepare. And without further ado, Liz? Jane, do you need to say anything first?
No, I want to go, yes. We brought to you three different options this evening for some restructuring of our debt. And the variables in there are as directed by the district to William Blair as far as the options we use, EDD, and things like that. So that's necessarily William Blair's numbers, just what we've asked them to include in these options. So.
I'd like a hard copy. I have it here, but I prefer one. Thank you.
Good. Well, I tried to address several things. In this presentation, just based on some questions as well as the three options that, last time we looked at some additional abatements into the future and then refunding, all with the primary objective of kind of flattening the trajectory of the debt service payments that were established back in 2008. This presentation, we're going to be looking at taking some of the district's existing fund balance and using it to that same end of flattening the debt service payments. Okay? So, Jane, if you could go forward. This slide looks at the annual savings from the series 2010 refunding bonds. And I put this up here as a result of a request of someone who just wanted to review, gosh, did those refunding from the 2010 bonds save the taxpayers anything? Well, not over time, because as we've discussed, whenever you stretch out bonds and go from a term of, in this case, it was 6 years to 15 to 20 years, there's going to be more interest cost, just like going from a 15 to a 30-year mortgage. However, the purpose of this refunding was to save people on their annual tax bill. And so this is what this slide shows. The savings on a $750,000 home from refunding bonds in years 2009 through 2014 and extending that to the end of the schedule where there's room to repay debt. So you can see the savings that accrued. Now, you also see the additional annual cost from the interest and then extending the principal one more year. So sure, it's pay now or pay later. The purpose of this refunding was to give taxpayer relief in those 6 years.
Excuse me, Liz, can you just point me to where on that sheet you're showing the difference in the interest? Is it?
Well, I'm showing you the difference in the debt service. So if you look on the fourth column from the left under Series 2008 bonds, those payments highlighted in blue.
Yes.
We refunded dollars from those
I
payments.
see those.
And then added, of course, the interest cost of the 2010 bonds to
Okay,
get the new total debt service.
I see that. And is there a grand total, like, at the end of the period, how much more the taxpayers will have paid? Is that here somewhere?
Well, if you look over time, what you can do is look at the bottom of the page under the total column. What we did is we removed about 2.9 million of debt service and replaced it with a 5 million of debt service from that one long bond, that we put at the end of the schedule. And again, why do we put it at the end of the schedule? If you look at the payments, they're all at 2 and 3 million. So we needed to find a place where, it's a reduction from your 2027 payment. So that's why it was put at the end. So the net cost there is about 2 million over time. In terms of present value of the cost, it's about half of that, so about 1 million in present value terms.
Okay, so the total cost of the debt in cash would be 39 million, correct?
That is the original 2008 bonds total debt service.
Okay,
That's not the revised amount, though.
that's not the revised amount.
Okay, I guess, if I put the total debt service column 3 from the left, a total there, that would give you that number, but it's really just take the 39 million, you subtract 2.9 million, you add the 5 million for that new total.
Essentially 2.1 million more than the
Right.
39.
Mhm.
So this is what we're sitting with right now.
Yeah,
That's our benchmark.
That's our benchmark, right?
this is the current situation.
Okay.
So, okay, so the total debt service, current state is this 42 million.
Well, that goes all the way back to, 2008, 2009. Okay, so.
So
we paid off,
actually, we paid some of this already.
Right, I understand, but, okay.
All right, so moving on, the next set of charts look at your current debt structure now with the abatement you did last year in 2012, where you took some of your operating funds, $1,170,588, and used it to pay principal and interest on bonds coming up here in 2013. And then the levy is abated or reduced, so the tax rate for bonds drops to 0 in 2012. You can see then it proceeds up at 20 cents and the tax rate increases. One thing I wanted to mention, Jane and I have talked about EAV assumptions. Last time I was here, we looked at a completely flat equalized assessed valuation of 0% for the next 20 years. And, after discussing it, that's not really very realistic. Hard to say what we should project. So Jane came up with these projections, which I think are very conservative still. 0 increase in 14, 15, 16, 1% in 17, 18, and 19, and 2% thereafter. Just to give a little more realism to the projection. Of course, we're not, saying this is what's going to happen, but I think we know 0 is not going to happen for the next 20 years.
2% is,
Did we check what we did over, say, the last 30 years, what it averaged out to?
No, I haven't done a 30-year average.
2% is the increase according to the Case-Shiller in the last 75 years until this real estate crisis. So it's not 2% increase in EAV, well, in market value, let's call it market value, is what Case-Shiller, the guys that are tracking real estate, have found is the true increase in value of houses, because what they've done is discounted, houses are getting bigger, so you discount for that. But if you take apples and apples, over 75 years, it's been 2%.
Although I guess it's been much more than that over the last 30 years.
Until 2008.
Well, what you have to do, in order for that analysis to be valid, is that the size of houses has increased also dramatically. So you have to discount that in your analysis. So part of the increase in assessed value, let's say if you look at Lake Bluff, is the fact that the average size of houses 15 years ago in Lake Bluff was probably 2/3 of what it is now.
But regardless, for purposes of leading us forward,
That's
this
2% is fine.
assumption is a fairly realistic assumption.
I
And that's
feel
what we're
confident
looking
about
at.
it.
Right, whatever it has been in the past, it seems like a realistic assumption. Okay.
Okay, good. So if we go on, the next page you saw as well, this is the debt structure, and the red line is the debt service tax rate, okay? So you can see how it dips down in 2012, and then it goes up to about 20 cents for 2 years, and then we have another jump up. Why is there a jump up between 14 and 15? The jump up there is because in 2010, when those bonds were refunded, the idea was just to take care of those 6 years and wait and see how things go and come back in 2014 and 15 and see, do you want to do it again? Do you have another strategy? So on and so forth. Okay, the next page, and I'm sorry the numbers probably look small on the screen, but this option, or this presentation, which you had in your last presentation, was just simply to show how the district's debt and operating has affected the taxpayers. And I think the main takeaway here is that in 2012 levy year, for taxes paid here in 2013, between the reduced operating tax levy and the debt service abatement, taxes went down for the owner of that $750,000 home by 20%. If we do nothing next year, because the bonds will come back on, and if we levy the 1.7%, that's the CPI or so, we're looking at about an 11% increase in taxes. So
30% swing.
it's a little bit of a
And
swing.
I don't think, just to reinforce that most taxpayers have thought a lot about that. They received their tax bills last year, there was a fairly significant decrease, and they don't understand that this coming year it's going to pop back up again unless we do something about that.
Right, and just to reemphasize, this is just the District 65 portion of the bill, so, you know, there's the village and there's Lake County Forest Reserve and all the other things that go into your tax bill.
13 taxing bodies.
Of which we make up, what
40%,
42%.
42%.
42%. So it's 10% of 42%.
The other
The swing is
increase,
30%.
Pardon me?
The swing is 30%. Right? If we went down 20% and then we're going up. Yes.
right,
That's right.
We go back to 2011 numbers, right? In 2011, they paid, this hypothetical person paid 381, and in 2013, they'll pay 382. Right? It's even with the 2 years ago.
yeah, if you look at the
Right.
total portion. And even if you look at the total tax bill portion, which is, you know, the sixth column from the left, you can see that, you know, it's going to take a little while to get back up to the 5,224 from 2011. But the other thing I highlighted in yellow on this chart again was that 2015 bump up for debt because of the ending of the effective Act 2010 refunding.
And the cost of that money, the average cost of interest on that present structure is what, 4.4%?
The 2010 bond was 4.4%. Yeah. I think it's-
And that was,
What were the 2008 bonds?
well, they were refined into the 2010, right?
Yeah, so the average true total interest cost is 4.48%, correct?
4.48% is what the cost on the 2010 bonds was. The all-interest cost on the 2008 bonds, I had that last presentation, I want from memory. I want to say it was like 465 in 2008, but I don't have that number right at my fingertips. I can get that back to you.
It doesn't matter, they're all put into one reissue anyway, correct?
Just a portion.
Yeah, and it's all rolled into 2010, right?
Right.
So, okay.
Okay, so page 5 is just a graphic of this District 65 portion of the tax bill and the impact on the $750,000 home. So I think all these graphs and numbers are kind of giving us the same message. You know, we've given the taxpayers a great break here in 2012, and now we've got more debt to pay, and where do we go from here? So these options look at a different approach. We're looking at, you talked about coming up with a fund balance policy. I know you've been working on that. So assuming you had a fund balance policy of 50% or so, and you decided to spend the amount of fund balance over that fund balance policy. In this case, we're saying we're going to keep the fund balance at 60%, so 40% of that we're going to use to pay down bonds. Okay? So what this does is it takes your fund balance down all at once. Okay? Because what you'll do is take that money, put it in an escrow to pay bonds. And there's several different ways we can structure that. You can do that. So that's what this option looks at. But I think the important thing to understand and determine if you feel comfortable with is, are you willing to go ahead and transfer, in this case, $5,230,000 from the education fund to pay off debt? And just so you know, when you do a defeasance, it's a permanent thing. You can't go back and change your mind a few years later. It's gone.
Two things.
From the reserve,
I-
from the reserve.
From the district.
I would just like to remind people that that money currently is over here in Northern Trust or Lake Forest Bank earning virtually nothing, 0.1%. So we have an opportunity to put this money to work in a more aggressive fashion through the fees.
Like T-bills or what?
Well, the second thing I just want to mention is that, and this is specifically for Dave over here, refunding, Dave, allows us to address bonds that would otherwise be uncallable.
You mean defeasance?
Defeasance. Defeasance allows us to refund bonds that would otherwise be uncallable.
Will that be explained more fully as you go on?
Sure, I think what we're trying to describe is how this defeasance works, okay? So you take your $5,230,000 and it's invested in U.S. government securities in an escrow with a bond escrow agent, okay? And that money is invested in such a way that it's going to mature on the call date of your bonds. Your bonds are callable, but as we kind of talked about last time, municipal bonds have 10-year call protection. So the 2008 bonds are callable in 2018. The 2010 bonds are callable in 2020. Okay? So that money goes in the escrow, but because it's set up and guaranteed to call in certain principal amounts on their call date, the interest associated with those principal amounts is also removed from the district's debt service payment schedule. So your auditor, when you set up this escrow, if you choose to go forward with this, will not show those principal and interest payments as a liability for the district any longer. They are not they are provided for in this escrow, which of course is in the U.S. government securities that will mature in 2018 and 2020 and call in the bonds.
So let me make sure, so the 5 million some change is principal, correct?
Well, it's
It's
cash.
principal. Yes,
It's cash that's going to be invested in
Sure.
government securities.
So when you say the interest,
I mean the interest associated with the bonds that are being called.
okay, all
Because I
right.
think that was one of the questions. So that you know, there's not, that interest is not going to just, you're not going to continue to pay it. It's associated with the principal that you're defeasing, and it will no longer be an obligation of the district. So it might be too technical for you, but I'm trying to explain the mechanics so no one gets confused about paying interest twice or something like that.
I'm remembering a previous conversation with this, and I just want to double check. So that money that goes into the escrow account, into that investment, there's no chance that something's not going to work out and it comes back to us where, you know, it didn't earn what it was supposed to and there's a problem.
No.
Didn't we talk about the possibility of like some Illinois fund or something that was
Well-
a really bad idea?
Yeah, good, I remember that conversation.
The issue is that when you invest in U.S. government securities, as you know, the rates are low. okay? So, to defease the bonds and take them off your books, they have to be in U.S. government securities, and they make these special securities called slugs, state and local government securities, that are used specifically for refunding escrows, okay? So you invest in slugs, unless our U.S. government goes down, everything's going to be okay. Okay, so I think that's clearly the safest path. But what you get on that safe path is a very low return, very low interest rate, right?
What is very low as compared to the John's numbers? That's what it's earning in Northern Trust. I take it it's something.
It's something. Well, treasury rates have come up too. So,
right.
Yes.
But you know, it's going to be in the 1%.
Trust rate is about the same as all the other banks.
Okay, yes, not that's a
They're going to tell you competitive rate in today's climate.
Like First Bank, et cetera.
What's the
Citibank.
difference between slugs and Northern Trust?
Well, you can't put it in CDs. And that would probably be ill-advisable. But what the option that other advisors are talking about to their issuers is that said, hey, instead of buying U.S. government securities, why don't you buy some state of Illinois bonds? The yields are much higher, obviously, with our state, which has been downgraded and is now at the A3 level. So, but it is a legal investment for these escrows. The only negative, there's many negatives, but the other negative is that if it's not in a U.S. government security, it's not, it still shows as a liability on your books, and then you show an offsetting asset, the investment in those state of Illinois bonds. So I think that might be what I'm thinking about.
I just want to make sure that's not.
No, not in these options, not anything we're suggesting. Just a straight slug type escrow. Okay? So I think the main point of this chart is that, you know, we're looking at taking $5,230,000 from the ed fund that will be transferred to
From the reserve.
from the reserve fund balance to the debt service fund. The ed fund in this case would then be down to 46.9%, and all operating funds together is at the 60%. Okay. Obviously, we can do case scenarios. You don't have to take that much. You can take less, and
Or we could take more.
you can take more.
So then, when does that money move over to pay down the bonds? It's called the bonds.
Right away. So
As soon as they're callable.
No, it would happen as soon, if you decided to do this this fall.
So there's an escrow,
Yeah.
right? But the bonds still aren't callable until 2018, 2019.
Right, but it's going to start paying off the interest on those bonds right away, so you're going to see reduction.
I see.
And the principal and everything is considered refunded, paid off because we've set up.
For our books. Okay.
Okay, so option one is a defeasance using just the 5.23 million. And I call this option defeasance soft landing because, as you recall, we had that big jump up in payments and in rates in 2015. So we're trying to ease the tax rate up to a level situation.
Just, and then when I talked earlier, I just want to clarify one thing for everyone. The $7,250,000 is not really net savings because we're investing in 5.23 to fees it. So in reality, if we want to get our net savings, we have to subtract the 5.2 and
So it's
I get roughly $2 million.
Yeah.
So effectively, if we invest 5.23, we're going to get back $7 million 15 years from now. Everybody?
I'm with you until the 15 years from now.
Well, if you invest 5.23 for defeasance purposes, we're going to get a savings of $7
Right?
million.
I'm with you. So
So effectively, it's like if I gave you 5.23 million, you're going to get back 7.25 million 15 years from now. And you can calculate the effective interest rate on that. I did it myself. It's up around 2.5%. So effectively, we're earning on this money, which is now earning nothing, almost 10 times what we would normally earn if we kept it.
Well, part of the savings, the way you get the $7,250,000 savings also, because you do earn interest, okay? You earn
Right,
interest,
right.
but you only earn interest to the call date, right?
Right.
Which is 18.
I understand.
20.
Right.
So you earn interest at that, up to that point, and then you call in all that principal.
Right.
So what happens is the interest that was associated with that principal disappears. So that's part of the savings too, okay? That's the beauty of having a bond that's got a call feature on it. If we had no call features on these bonds, the savings would be a lot worse.
So the district saves over a 15-year period, in this scenario, a little over $2 million.
Right, net. I mean, I was trying to just show the savings to the taxpayers.
Right, okay.
So net present value, what would that be?
On what?
Well, the 2 million is on 15 years, right? So,
You didn't count the net present value on the 5?
no, on the savings.
On the net savings?
Yeah.
Yeah, well.
Yeah, that's a, yeah, never mind.
Yeah,
It depends on the discount rate we choose, right? Yeah, so let's go with just the cash, okay.
So this is no new bonds, of course, just the cash, setting up the escrow, and you can see the impact of the $750,000 home. So
next year, the decrease will be $193 for that individual.
right, and actually, it's not next year, remember, next year is the 20 cents. Next year is
Oh, right.
2013, so we go up the 20 cents because we abated everything entirely in 2012.
Because there's nothing we can do about that.
Nothing you can do.
We go back to 2011 rates.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
So that's going to happen regardless of what we decide, okay?
Yep. And then, you know, what, it just kind of increases, 21, 26, 29, 31, 35 is kind of where it stables. And the thing that stabilizes, and the thing to look at is your level debt. You've gone from, you know, an increasing debt schedule that gets as high as like 3.2 million in 2026 to a stable debt payment schedule at 2.1.
So there's no surprises, it's kind of level year. Now, what happens to that 2.9 million that was at the end of the Series 10 bond? How does that fall in here? The final payment, we had 2.9
Well, the
million.
final payment is still in the same year, it's just,
It's just affected by...
it's just less, we're
Okay.
paying, you know.
It's now 2.1 instead of 2.9.
Okay.
Okay, so that's just using the cash. And the next page is a picture of that, and the debt does not get extended any further, of course, and we've got flat payments, so we can see how they increase, but they flatten at the 2.1 million level. The red line is the tax rate, and as the 2% growth happens, you've got a little bit of a decline in the tax rate in those last 5 years. Okay, options 2 and 3.
Just to be clear, I'm sorry, that last column, savings on a $750 home is compared to what we currently are doing.
Exactly. It's current situation, what would happen to the taxes versus if we do this option, what are the savings?
Whereas the savings on the very first chart you showed was compared to prior to refunding in 2008.
It was the same comparison. It was what you would have paid without the refunding versus what you're paying after the refunding. So it's really the same amount, what you would have paid in the current situation versus now. Okay. All right, so page 9 looks at the description of the next couple options. And we're still using the $5,230,000 fund balance, but we're supplementing it in option 2 with a small bond issue of about $1.43 million to level the debt service within the current amortization, we're not extending. And then option 3, we do extend the debt service by 5 years to 2033, which is our maximum, given a 20-year maximum repayment schedule, using the 5.23 million fund balance plus 7.64 million of refunding bonds to create lower total level debt service.
And the reason for selecting 1.43 instead of 2.5 is to level the tax rate. Is that why you picked that number? Okay. If you picked a larger number, the tax rate would have decreased even quicker. If you picked a smaller number, it would go up, correct?
Well, let's go to option 2 and look at that, because that's what you're talking about.
Right.
What we tried to do here was say, okay, we know what the debt level debt is if we just use your $5,230,000. Remember that was about 2.1 million a year?
Right.
But we had a ramp up to get to that 2.1 million. So then we asked ourselves, what type of bond issue would we need to issue to keep the debt service as level as possible, okay? And that answer is about just a small issue of $1,430,000 paid off in the first 5 years, and that's refunding more bonds out in the long end. So there's actually some savings there, because remember we talked about when you stretch out debt, it costs more, when you shorten debt, it costs less. So we're taking some of these bonds that are maturing out in 24, 25, and we're paying them off in just the next 5 years.
And just to step back to my earlier comment, the savings on this scenario is 2.5 million compared to the 2 million earlier. You take the 7.698 and subtract the 5.23 defeasance, right?
But and I think another, that's true, that's enough. But what you can see is the savings is higher in this option.
Yeah,
Right. Why is the savings higher in this option? It's because we're getting some savings from these
right, I
refunds.
understand.
too. Okay.
But it is a higher, effectively a higher return because we're getting more savings through the refunding, as opposed to not just simply using the defeasing. Okay.
And the number on the savings, the net number is 2 point, on the first option.
2020 is what I got.
202.
2.02. This one's 2. You can calculate yourself. 2.468 million.
Okay.
I noticed that between option 1 and option 2, the savings to a taxpayer on a $750,000 home is not that dramatic, the difference there.
Yeah,
It totals over 13, whatever it is, 13 years, about $300 difference. By going from option 1 to option 2.
I realize this, but I also think that we have to think in a more radical. Sometimes tax bill. And one of the reasons why the property taxes are a little bit out of whack has to do with the fact that most taxing body will say, it's only $150, it's only $300, et cetera, but if every taxing body does that, that's how we end up with, a very substantial, real estate bill. So I think that the framework to look at this option is actually the total cost of borrowing money, because ultimately we want to make sure that we get the most bang for our bucks. So to the extent that we can and get it in taking advantage of the environment so we can get lower interest rate, then it's good for the district.
So tell me, option 2, what is the assumption about the interest rate we're getting on
On
this?
that little bond issue, the 1.43 million, the interest rate is 2.58%.
And the basis for that assumption,
Is interest rates as of, I think it was August 12th when I ran these numbers, and a AA3 bond.
double A3? Mm-hmm.
So it's
The
what?
AA2, I'm sorry.
Double A2? And how does that, what number should I be comparing that number to in the current bond? Like, what's the spread between the bond rate, the interest rate on the current bonds? Is that the 4.4 number or no?
Yeah, I mean, on your current bond, the 08s, as I said, was a little higher, like 4.65, and the 2010s are 4.48, but those were much longer bonds, okay?
Right.
These are just short 5-year bonds,
Mhm.
so the rates will be lower because they're on that short end of the yield curve, which is where the best interest rates are right now.
Yeah.
Long interest rates have really gone up,
Yeah,
so.
since May 1 point.
Yeah.
Let me ask you a question. In option 1, we have, if you look at the savings on the $750,000 home, it goes down each year, and including 2014, it's level. But in option 2, we actually see an increase in 2014. Is there any way to offset that, or what options do we have to offset that in such a way that it's either level or it goes down like it does in option 1?
Well, option 2, the goal is to get to level debt service as quickly as possible using the new bonds. I think after I talked to Jamie and kind of reviewed these options to begin with, we went back to the drawing board and to see if we could make a little softer landing, from 2014 and 15. But if we do that, that means we stretch out this refunding bond, and there's more interest costs, the savings are less, and it doesn't get you to the same place you would in option one.
But the homeowner's going to see, in this case, a rather dramatic increase.
It's going to be 20 cents, then 27, you're right, so that's going to go up.
That's a 35% increase.
Remember, this difference is versus what they would have paid.
Right.
Okay? So it is going to go up versus what they would have paid. But then the whole idea is to flatten the debt service for good, for the life of the debt.
Right.
And in this option, we get it down to 1.9 versus 2.1 million a year in the prior option.
I just think since most people think in the short term, that is going to require some explanation. Because we're going to see a 35% increase in the debt portion of your tax rate.
The only way you could soften that we tried to restructure it with bonds, it doesn't really work. The only way you could soften that would be an abatement.
And maybe we want to think about that.
So 35%, how are you getting 35%?
It's going from 20 cents to 27.
And 35% increase.
Right. So a person, their tax bill, which went down, they had a savings of $494, all of a sudden they're going to have an increase to $168. That's a $668 increase on the debt portion of the debt. Whereas in option one, it actually continued to go down. And
What kind of abatement would you need to get that down to zero?
Well,
where we defeat
You
it.
have to meet the revised rate, there, it's 1.5, right, 1.6.
yeah, we'd have to, use a couple $100,000 for sure to get that down.
1.1 is 18 cents.
What's that, Jane?
1.1 million is 18 cents.
So if you want to get down, 4 cents of that 7 cents, you might look at 400,000 or something like that.
So you would add the 400 to the 1.4?
Sorry?
We abate the 400 and then you refile the 1.4, is that it?
Yeah, well, you rebuy the 1.4, but then when you get out to 2014 next year, if you wanted not to have that 27 cents, the thing is, if you look at the graph on the next page, you're going up to that level debt service point. It's just, I would say if you like option one, with a softer landing where we take more time to get to the level, but it's a higher level altogether, then you should go more towards option one. But if you like the 1.9 million, getting to the level debt as quickly as possible and leveling it, that's where option two, I think, is better.
I like option one, but I like option two better, except for 2014. So, you're a bond wizard. There's got to be a way to figure that out, either through abatement or perhaps take a larger refund.
Where would you have that, John? If it wasn't 27 cents, would it be 25 cents?
I'd like to keep it somewhere between, well, it depends. The goal would be to keep the increase minimalized on the taxpayer, because the taxpayer is going to see a pretty substantial increase that year.
But are we talking about hitting the same peak
So,
eventually?
right. I'm just talking about the short term, people only look forward a year or two. So my preference would be to see the savings be consistent with option one, more or less. The bump up of 35% in that debt portion sort of troubles me a little bit.
I agree with that, which leads me to the question of why not option one? The savings overall,
Well,
there's an additional
There's
savings. with option
there's
two.
$500,000 more in savings.
Yeah.
There's $500,000 more, so
Yes.
and we have to be able to sell this to the community.
Yeah.
And that's the thing I'm thinking about here.
Right.
2,020,000 versus 2,468,000.
Right.
So you could abate this in 2014 to meet this concern,
Right.
right? You could do a $500,000
She
abatement.
said a half, 400,000.
Well, that 400,000 is like 4 cents. If you want to do just 2 cents, we can see what's happening with the.
So that's an option.
Yeah.
To keep this level
Right, we're
essentially.
more level. Yeah, okay. I just needed to know what the options were there.
Because if we stretch out this debt, then we're getting closer to 2 million, you know, we're
Right.
getting closer to option one. So-
Yeah, I agree.
So what are the fees associated with a $1.4 million bond issue? I mean, what are we spending to get this
Well, the
440,000
all-in
additional?
The all-in true interest rate, including all cost of issuance, is like 2.58%, but it's, you know, it's not gonna be very big. On a million, 430, it's gonna be maybe 25,000, 30,000.
And those are baked into these numbers, correct?
Yeah,
So that all the interest cost is includes our, the
absolutely.
district costs and fees
Yes.
to you guys and everything.
Yes.
Okay.
The other thing to know, these defeasances, there's cost of issuance associated with those as well.
Substantial or?
No, like 20, 25,000.
Okay.
Why is that?
The projections that we have.
Yes.
I don't understand what those costs are.
Well, you have to pay the bank to act as the escrow agent, the fiduciary of the money. You have to pay me a fee, it's small.
We do?
You do. I love seeing you guys, but, you know, you have to get paid at some point. But for structuring the escrow the way you want it, that's a structuring fee. And then you need a bond opinion that this escrow is a true defeasance, so you have some legal fees as well.
What's the risk if we decide that we want to wait 6 months or a year?
Well, if you want to do option one, there's really no risk, okay, because there's no new bond.
Because there's no refi.
Right. Let's just think about the tax rate.
And the money is just sitting in
0.1%.
0.1%, right? I mean, it's the
Really?
the delta, the interest rate. Right?
Yeah. I mean,
Well, I guess I need to ask the question another way. You're the expert here. Are bond rates going to go down further in the next year?
I wish, but
Okay, so-
that's not going
Further.
to happen. That's not
Or
going to
down.
happen. No.
Yeah.
How we have the defeasance structured in option one is such a way that some of the interest that we're defeasing in the first 2 years, we're using in 15, 16, and 17 to create that soft landing.
Right, right.
So timing on this, for this particular option, needs to be by the end of the 2013 levy abatement cycle, which is going to be January, February 2014.
But each day we wait, the interest rates change.
Yeah, but for option one, again, the interest
Well, option
rates
one doesn't
don't.
affect
We
it.
actually want the interest rates to go up for option one, so that we can invest at a higher rate in that escrow. But options 2 and 3, that has a bond component. The good thing about option 2 is that bond component is very short, and that's where the least damage is happening in our market in years 1 through 5.
Right.
Now, one other thing, I just for clarification purposes, need a somewhat further explanation. You've provided this for me, but it wouldn't hurt for me to hear it again. The interest payment that we pay in any 1 year is not just a simple calculation of multiplying interest times principal. It's a calculation of the multiple issues that I get. Can you explain that a little bit?
Sure. You know, any interest payment is made up of the principal amount times the rate for each maturity, okay? So let's say the interest you're paying in 2014 fiscal year. It is calculated by, for example, let's say you have $1 million in 2014 at 3.5%, so it's 3.5 times that million. Plus, you have $2 million the next year times 3.6%. So as you go out on the yield curve, interest rates get higher and your bond rates get higher, but the interest you're paying is not a simple interest calculation. It is an interest, you have to calculate the interest on each piece of your maturity schedule. Does that help?
Yes.
And are those pieces annualized or, I mean?
The interest is paid semi-annually.
So that's another element too. There's a function in Excel I can show you. There's a function in Excel to figure this out.
Dave, your question?
Yeah, I do. Just picking up on what you just explained. If you look
Wait,
at-
microphone.
Thanks. If you look at the chart that you previously given us for current rate, current repayment schedule, in the current year, it indicates 3.5% And you described something that takes other years into consideration.
Right, and that interest payment you're paying right now is not a result of simply the bond maturing in the next year. It's of the interest associated with every bond in that maturity schedule. So think of it from an investor point of view. If you bought a bond that matures in 2018 and it's got a rate of 4%, the interest on that bond at 4% is in your 2013 payment, right? Just as well as the maturity at 3.5% for the 2014 year, the interest from that maturity is in that interest payment, okay?
Okay, so I guess my question is why bother to show any interest rate at all on repayment schedule, because it doesn't work out to do that?
Well, that kind of goes to the questions of, what was the average rate on the 2010 bonds, okay? And that was 4.48. That's the average rate if you blend the maturities together and the interest. Just on the 2008 bonds, the average rate of all those maturities together was 4.65%, okay? So that's the blended rate that we talk about. But if you're an investor, you don't buy the whole bond, you buy each maturity. And so each maturity has its own coupon and its own fixed rate.
I guess the fallacy of the misunderstanding on the part of we only think in terms of what's the mortgage line. It's not.
Yeah, no.
It's not the same.
No, not at all. It's,
Thanks, Louis.
Thank you. Thumbs up.
Okay, so let's go to option 3. This is the stretch out for 5 years. Again, we're taking the $5,230,000 cash for the defeasance, and we're issuing $7,640,000 of new refunding bonds to create, again, level debt service, but we're extending the maturity for 5 years. So what does this do for us? It makes our annual payments down to $1.7 million. Okay? So,
But this one has a cost to it.
well, sure, it does. It does, because, again, when you're stretching out bonds, you've got a cost. Mhm. So, because you're giving $5,230,000 to the structure, your total net saving, your total savings to the taxpayers is $2.8 million. So you're still saving the taxpayers money. But remember, if you're using $5,230,000 of your own money, you need to add that back to that negative to show that.
So it's a cost of
there's a
two.
cost.
so there's
Cost
actually a
3 million.
cost.
Yeah.
There's really two problems. First, you're extending the debt, which I think is problematic because if we think that we're going to have to do major renovation on middle school, and we think that we should be doing this or start thinking about this in 15 years or so, then you're adding another 5 years.
This one doesn't make any
It
sense.
doesn't, no. it
So
doesn't.
I think this is
Yeah, we should X this one.
this is not a good.
To play off Christine's point, can you, I did ask this question in advance, and I got a little bit of a written response, but if you guys could, for the audience and for me again, talk a little bit about how our bonding capability changes over time. So let's say that we get some feedback from the community that we really need to invest a significant amount of money in middle school in 2020, for example. Do we have the excess capacity to bond a project of $10, $20 million type project?
Jane can probably answer that better than I.
By law, we can have as much as 6.9% of our EAV in outstanding bonds.
Okay.
Okay.
But it's a matter of cash flow.
Pardon?
It's a matter of cash flow because you get to pay the debt back.
Right.
So-
What is that? What is 6.9%?
Yeah, I think we're 40 million plus.
Oh,
but
that's
I-
without the 40 plus million.
I believe that was the number I cap.
Yeah, you had this in an email.
Yeah.
So, for example, if our bonding power right now, we're 40 million, and we currently have outstanding, I don't know what the principal is, 18 million or something like that.
Yep.
Okay, then if we needed to build a school right now, we would be limited to $22 million.
Okay.
And that we could issue today. So if the school costs $30 million, we couldn't build that school.
Right.
So that's our bonding power. When we talk about bonding power, that's how much debt we can issue at this time. and it is a basic percent.
And I imagine every year that would increase a little bit as we pay.
As we pay these bonds down, and if our EAP will start going
Yeah.
up, then yes, our bonding power will grow.
Okay.
So the 18 is what we owe, I mean, the principal now, but they say in 2020, that principal is going to be down
Correct.
by, I don't know, a factor of $2.5 million maybe, or something like that.
If we chose option 1 and had the money set aside, does it still work the same way?
Yes, but from what I'm hearing, that $5 million doesn't count against
Right, now, the $5,230,000 is not going to pay off exactly $5,230,000. Probably pay off something like $4,500,000 of principal. And you might ask, why is that? Well, why is that? The reason that is because the interest that we're earning in that escrow is, at the 1%, the low rates that we talked about with the treasuries for that short-term investment. But the rate on the bonds originally was 4.65%. So the difference there is something we call negative arbitrage. So for any advance refunding right now, that's why when I came here a couple times ago looking at refunding your bonds just for savings with new bonds, it doesn't work right now because of those very low short-term rates. So this $5.23 million of defeasance may take out $4.6 million of principal. Okay, so that does increase your balance.
So it also then increases our bonding
Capacity.
But even if we have the bonding capability, assuming we wanted to do something big at the middle school in 15 years, even having the capability, I doubt that having extended this, the taxpayers would be up for adding additional debt.
Right, that's what makes this unattractive.
Yeah, I agree with you.
And the option 3, we asked her to put that in because we often get questions about what would happen if we extended it. And we thought it would be a good comparison for you to actually see how it plays out.
Okay.
So just to summarize, the next page is just a graph of the 5-year extension. You can see the payments are level at the 1.7 million and the tax rate's lower. But page 14, I wanted to put all these options on one page for you. It's all colorful, but the current debt service are the highest bars in the dark, or I guess they're black. And then the option 1 debt.
This is a new page 14?
Yeah, it's like under Hannah.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Oh, see, we don't have that. All right, so we'll have to look
She
at
added this today.
I added this because I think someone was
Okay.
looking for a summary, so I thought this might just be a graphic that might be helpful, maybe not. So you can see the black bars go up the highest. That's your current debt schedule, right? The blue bars are option 1, where we're taking the $5,230,000 and we're just doing the defeasance and we're leveling the debt off at $2.1 million a year. So you can see where that is. Then we've got the green bars, which is option 2, where we're doing the defeasance plus the $1,430,000 bond issue, and you've got that debt service now down to $1.9 million, and then the last option in the purple bars is the one we just reviewed, the extension of 5 years and annual debt service is about $1.7 million. So it just kind of gives you the different shapes, where you are currently, and what each of these options would do to your future debt structure.
Well, it seems to me very simply that option 1 is the floor of what we ought to do. It's the floor of what we ought to do, and we're really considering between option 1 and option 2. It strikes me that we don't want to do nothing. I mean, when we have $2 million and essentially paying ourselves $2 million and
Well, effectively, option 2
sitting out there.
takes advantage of the fact that we have a healthy reserve, and we could use a piece of that, and a piece that comes under the top part. I mean, the state will recognize 25% fund balance and provide us with the highest rating. And we've decided, I think, among us, that that's probably not where we want to be ultimately. But 60%, I think the strategic plan recommendation is 60, and from what I've learned, 60 is a pretty conservative number for us. So even by using 5.23 and putting it to work, earning it better than we would normally have, is probably a smart thing to do from a number of different perspectives. We're using taxpayers' dollars, we're earning more money than we'd earn in the existing bank account, and we're going to buy down debt and save ourselves $2.5 million.
right?
Is it 2.5 under option 2?
Right. I mean, does that summarize it?
I think option 1 is easy to, relatively speaking, easy to explain to the taxpayers, right? When you mix option 1 and option 2, it becomes more difficult, not impossible, but more difficult to explain why we're taking on.
Well,
Yeah.
we have a choice of sitting around with 100% reserve on our books.
No, I suggest, so what I'm suggesting is option 1 at least.
Right.
My question to me is whether it's option 1 plus
Right.
1.4 or option 1 plus 2 or option.
Well, option 2
Is option
2 plus, is option 1 plus 1.4.
Right.
Is it the consensus among the board that option 3 we shouldn't waste our time talking about?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, good. That's progress.
And I think that the primary reason is that it's not sound fiscal management to push the can down the road. And second, I think it presents a real problem for the ability of future board to do
Exactly.
any kind of
Refund.
referendum for, middle school. I think it's a lot easier as an argument to say, well, we were paying $2 million. This bond is now expiring, so we already have this. You see what I'm saying? Without having major impact on the taxpayer. So I think that this notion that like as an investor, you will ladder your bonds. As a borrower, you want to, you're not going to buy 3 cars at the same time.
The other thing that makes me feel a little better, one of my concerns, we talked about this earlier, was we had, as of 4 o'clock, not received our reserve study. We now have it. We were concerned about whether we were going to need significant remedial action on the middle school or in other areas. And now it looks as though, from the recommendations that I read this afternoon, and Jane, correct me if I'm wrong, that through 2029, we need about $2.5 million.
But that's only to deal with maintenance kind of stuff, like paint peeling and doors chipping and...
No.
Yeah. Because wait, there's a piece of this report we don't have yet.
Comes in September.
That'll come in September, which is how does this building function for the purposes that we have?
Jane, what's that called again?
Was this
Educational adequacy.
reserves to be?
So how does that align with our plan for educating our
Well, what's the maximum cost that would incur?
And I don't think we know.
I also, to be honest, I don't know about anybody else, but I did not get to that document till late in the day. Really have not had a chance to digest that very thoroughly.
Well, I looked at it and reached the same conclusion that John did, that it looked pretty good.
Yeah,
Do you hear now that there's a piece, do we have any ballpark on what the rest of the study may show?
No, it's going to be meeting with our educational leaders and Mr. Blackmer and Dr. Sophie and teachers and looking at the building from the educational standpoint, not just repair, replace boilers, that
For
kind of thing.
instance,
It's going to be more of it.
That's something that I see that will come out of it.
So can I just ask a clarifying question?
Front of the
So what we
building
got-
not being ADA accessible.
So
But see, this spoke
Well,
to safety though.
is this strictly maintenance, the one we just got?
This is bricks and mortar, is what I would call
Okay,
it. This
current-
is bricks and mortar.
Maintaining current structure though?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes. And it looks at mechanicals, it looks at finishes and roofs and.
yeah.
Which is where you can bleed a ton of money.
Yeah, like it's worth
Yeah.
the time.
Yes.
Yes. And there's no
We've
doubt.
done a lot of renovation work in that building recently, but
Yeah, we did $5 million.
recently, when you look
Right.
down 12, 15, 18 years, that stuff was in there.
So the 2.5 you quoted, I didn't get to it at all.
I didn't.
But the 2.5 you quoted is for what period of time?
Through 2029. It's all repairs, HVAC, roof, everything else.
But it doesn't say anything
So
about,
if we were going to do work on the coral room, that's not.
That's not
in
For
there.
example,
None of that.
or staff labs.
Or in the
right?
building.
we're making the front of the building.
Well, but I think that it is not.
Science labs or,
Let's go
Well, that's
over
the
time.
distinction I'm trying to make.
I was talking to a lot of people.
Next.
But it did say that it addressed the safety concerns. So I'm
Safety.
trying to get the sense that
They will
entrance and
be,
things like that.
this will include what's health life safety, if it's a violation of code, health life safety, not necessarily the security of the front entrance as it's designed now and visitors entering and
Okay.
that type of thing.
So like if the steps were crumbling, that kind of safety, but not the
Right, security, I understand. Okay, okay.
No,
Or accessibility, how about like accessibility?
Not
No, not.
And some of those maybe should be part of an ongoing annual capital plan that we build into our expense.
Yeah, that's what, I think that, that's.
So you provide for those expenses over time through a capital budget.
I mean, my reaction to looking at all of this is that we ought to do probably option 1 or option 2. The sound of this conversation tonight sounds like maybe closer to option 2 for me, but I would prefer to defer the actual decision on that until we've talked about that stuff, until we have this second report, and until we have a little bit more information about what we want to do with the middle school.
When will that be? Because the longer we wait, the more risk we take.
Well, but she's saying for option 2, there's not a lot of risk, and I'm not talking about waiting 2 years. I'm talking about maybe 2 months.
Well, what is it? Can anyone give us an indication of what we would be waiting to get that information?
Can I ask one more question? Could we do this in pieces? Could you defease 2 million now and, not that we want to, but 2 million now and 2 million 2 years from now? And or is there the cost that you talk about, your cost, et cetera?
Every time you have a transaction, you're gonna have a cost.
Cost. So it's cost prohibitive on that
You will
point.
have, costs every time you do the
So
transaction.
count 30 grand every time.
Okay, I didn't mean to interrupt your question, but that had been percolating.
What if we defeased and then waited until we had these decisions to refinance? Is that possible? Because defeasement doesn't really affect, well, it does, we're using the 5 million.
That's. Gene, do you have any
That
sense?
would also be double cost of issuance.
Okay.
Do we have any
Yeah.
sense for timing from BLDD on the second part?
I thought they were gonna set us to do this in 10 days, from when we talked about
I
it.
told you the cost would be under $10,000, and we would try to get it done by the end of July or to August 7th, and they got it done on August 20th. This is the secondary part of that contract. There's no way they could do that portion because it involves actually being in the school and talking
With
to
kids.
educators and teachers.
So what's the date when we will have this information? Does anyone?
Well, even if we had that information, isn't that really a pretty nebulous thing? I mean, everybody's gonna have an idea as to what
We
we're spending money on.
I thought that what the board was needing as far as information went was, when are we going to have to invest in a new roof? When are we going to have to invest in infrastructure?
That's true.
So that was what I've been pushing them to get done. So when you have this conversation, you can see, do we have something looming 5 years from now that's going to
Yeah.
cost $4 million?
Right, I don't.
Like a big ticket item where we need to replace a boiler and it's gonna set us back by, $1
And
million.
furthermore, we'll still have $9 million left if we use the 5.23 to fees.
Yeah, so it's not like,
I would suggest we get moving on this while we can. And the only other thing I'd suggest is looking at not only a transfer of what we have here at 60, but see what the numbers look like if you brought that down to 50%.
Well, we have a recommendation from a committee at a strategic planning session they offered a range, I think.
That was the top end though.
Right, 25 to 60%.
Right.
So that's another area that it's a little bit concerning to me that we don't have all this facilities information. We also don't have a policy on fund balance.
But that's
I also think that,
But that's a big range we've got.
That's just a recommendation now.
Going to look for just what the figures would be if we decide to do it at 50%.
And the board
That
makes the
makes sense.
decision. The board makes the ultimate decision. We can take the recommendation, but.
Right.
Mike, the microphone.
Sure. Go ahead, please.
I was on the committee that talked about the 60%,
Yep.
and they said that that could be a target, but the minimum would be 25%. So they were comfortable with the idea, we were comfortable with the idea of it being down at 25%, but would, it depends on the year. There may be certain years where there's major expenses that come up that would necessitate moving to 25%. Other years when there aren't expenses, it'd be billed back up to 60%.
Right.
With the anticipation that there's going to be another year down the road when a lot is needed. I do have another thing on the reserve study. Thank you for getting this done. As I look through this, there are things that need analysis. Every engineer that does a reserve study throws the kitchen sink in there. Otherwise, they could be sued for having left something out. Well, one of the things they've got in here, and as a board or as an administration, you have to go through and say, would we really do all these things? And the best example I can come up with is replacing the foundation and the structure for $7 million. You'd never do that. You would
So it's not our lifetime, that's gonna happen.
There are other things in there they definitely would do, but there are certain things like the foundation structures, you just wouldn't do that.
Because you build a new school, or is that because you build a new school?
And that's what you're saying, Neil?
Yeah, that's what we're studying and analyzing, a reserve study.
And Nick, Neil, just for clarification, the reason we asked for this study was so that we would understand on the outside what we might need should we use the 5.23 or whatever it ends up being for defeasance, what we might need incrementally to protect our infrastructure.
Oh, I agree with that. It's just that we gotta take the outside things.
But it's also the,
Yeah, Neil, we need you to use the mic if we're gonna have ongoing.
And now I've got
there is also the fact that, let's say if we decide that, around 2028, right? That's when the bond.
Won't be me.
Yeah, okay, the next board, let's say decides to do a brand new school, and let's say in 2026, they say you have to redo the entire roof, then we patch the roof because we know that we're going to a new school. Therefore, we don't need to take this, and then we can take some of that reserve and apply it toward the new school. So those are long-term strategic decisions, and it's difficult to assess, with degree of certainty, not only the cost, but the likelihood of, as you say, what could go wrong. There's also a couple of things that are in the community that people are confused about. Is what is a reserve? I mean, what is the purpose of the reserve? And some people think that we should set aside some funding every year so we can redo the middle school in 15 years. But from a taxation standpoint, it's not really the right way to do this because you're taxing people now for benefits in the future. And I know I sound like a geek, but when you do long-term capital expenditure, they are usually bonded. And there's a reason because you're going to make people pay for the bonds that are really going to take advantage of the benefits that you derive from the capital expenditure. Normally, a reserve is for, let's say, in case of there's something unexpected, a lawsuit, and so on and so forth, or if you think that the source of revenue that you derive for the school has some basic instability. Well, because 90% of our revenue is real estate taxes, it's not like we're getting money from sales tax. You see what I'm saying? Like, for instance, the village will have a reserve that is 30%, and I would like it to be 35% because a very substantial portion of our revenue comes from sales tax. So if there is a dip in the economy, and most of that comes from over sales, then we are really at risk. But the source of funding for the school is not really at risk because we're going to get the real estate taxes. Now, EAV may go down somewhat, but it's more stable than sales tax. So when we have the discussion about the reserve, we have to think about this. Why do we want the reserve? And I agree that we have to, in the reserve, set aside maybe, accrue every year some money so we can do a science lab 5 years down the road or something like this. That is perfectly legitimate, but not for huge capital expenditure.
I'd like to take another question. Sean, would you like to ask a question?
While we're on the reserve, I do actually just want to know how you came up with the 60% figure, what thought was being put into it. I'd also like to know what comparable districts are doing. as far as the reserve amount. And I understand, other issues, but we're dealing with an educational entity, and there are many different types of scenarios that come into the reserve besides the building costs. Maybe because I'm on this realm, but I think Chris had mentioned lawsuits, and, that's something that's very possible, and...
But we have insurance too.
Okay. And well, again, insurance, you have to kind of meet some certain criteria to hit the insurance too, and sometimes the insurance companies may say, you know what, you guys did not do this, X, Y, or Z, and we're not going to insure it, you didn't use our counsel, so we're not going to pay those attorney's fees. I think the bottom line is I really would like to know basically how the percentage was figured out, what thought was given into it, and
Got 4 people.
okay, in comparable districts.
So we're a couple of years.
We didn't set it up, they did.
There's 4.
Okay, no, so we had educators who were involved, who are familiar with the current educational systems and possible core curriculum requirements.
You want to read the list of the people who were attending?
No, just explain the composition, explain the composition.
No, I just want to know how you figured out
Part
the
of the
60%.
strategic planning process, there was a group of people put together by the superintendent that included community residents, people from the school, and also some parents.
Parents,
So it was a
staff.
mixture of people.
We have
People
two
with
parents
Spanish
that are on
backgrounds.
that committee also.
We have 3
So we
people.
have
2 parents.
2 community members and 2 parents that were both on the committee that were here this evening, and I know.
And we deliberately chose people who we did know had some differences of opinions on these things as well.
But you raise a good point, because fundamentally, setting the reserve level and policy is a function of the board, and I think it deserves discussion in an open forum, perhaps right this minute, as to what we think is an appropriate level. I do think that's something we need to discuss as community representatives.
Absolutely.
Now, I will
Yeah.
say that
I don't know what to do tonight. I think it's going to be a big conversation.
I don't know.
And the other thing, I gotta tell you, I was checking my son's basically back to school information, and I saw that there was a special meeting called. Is there gonna be another opportunity to have the public present to hear these discussions? Because it came to me as kind of quite a surprise. So maybe more public knowledge so that,
Well, we've been talking about last year.
no, I just said that I just happened, there was a special meeting called, and I know things have happened, but people are on vacation, things like that. I'm just wondering if there's gonna be another opportunity for the public to be involved
in the strategic plan.
in, the discussion of the
bonding
options
discussion.
and to hear the options and
There-
basically what happened today.
There's not currently planned a town hall type meeting.
Okay.
There is a meeting scheduled for Thursday that we scheduled last week, for this coming Thursday that we scheduled last week, should we walk out of today needing more time.
Okay.
So there will be opportunity for public comment.
But this is actually the second meeting we ever had on the bond. And there was also a lengthy discussion of bond and the reserve back last year in November.
Yes, I was present at that, and there was a lot more public input, but I also think that, people were on vacation and things like that, so that people were more aware of it.
I think that one of the things that is driving this is that if we decide to do some refine, we have to catch it when the bond market is favorable before interest rates do go up. So we do not control that. I mean, you see what I'm saying?
Yeah,
I mean,
but I know
so
it's
if we
very
want to, what is important is that we keep track of, what is the decision making here. We're trying to make sure that we pay the debt in a due fashion. Make sure that we pay the debt in such a manner that we use the money very wisely, and make sure that we do not interfere in any way with major remodeling in the middle school, 15 years down the road. I mean, those are the 3 criteria. Then we look at the scenario and we look at, what is the saving? So we rule out number 3 because it extends the debt and it costs money. And then it's between 1 and 2.
Could, sorry,
I guess my
Yeah.
question was really about the reserve, so.
Yeah, I
I guess
understand.
I'm trying to just balance the educational component.
Could,
Well, the state-
That's
there's
kind of
four
where-
folks, there's four people here who were at that meeting, and maybe Ann, would you volunteer to summarize for us how that conversation went?
Okay, so we met.
And you guys chime in if you.
Yes, and chime in. The 25% basically just came from the fact that the previous board, about a year and a half ago, came to our attention, had decided the state of Illinois recommended you have to have 25%, otherwise you're considered
That's to get the.
unwise. So that's where the 25% came. Just so you have an understanding, our group really struggled with what is appropriate. There were some of us who were way above the 60%. There were some of us who were in this lower range. So it was by no means, I would say, an easy discussion for us. And at the end of the day, we took the average of, I think, the dozen people or so who were at the table and averaged it out. So I gave a percentage, Neil gave a percentage, you gave a percentage, and that's how it came about. But the 25% just being the lowest end,
That's the state number.
based on the state number. The one thing that I would like to just share my opinion on is that I am concerned that we're making this decision without the rest of the BLDD. We have not talked about what are the standards for our students, and to me that's concerning. I mean, this is our kids' education. So that, I'm just concerned that there isn't enough discussion about how are we going to move our kids forward in comparison to Lake Forest, where they're going to go to high school and they're going to compete academically. I'd like that to be more of a part of the discussion, and I do sort of agree. I would also like to see more community involvement as part of this.
There's a $15 million reserve right now, correct?
15 million, right?
We're taking $5 million out. There's still $10 million in reserve. That is a pretty substantial number. I would like to, I did a lot of, I spent a lot of time on the internet looking for policy on reserve for school. They're non-existent. They don't exist. You can find policy on reserve for park district, villages, and so on and so forth. You cannot find anything for school. I think that policy is going to be us together deciding on, what is needed, what are the eventuality that would be needed from a reserve. In other words, what unexpected stuff we would need and what stuff we would need from a curriculum standpoint that would need to be taken place. And that is a conversation we're going to have. But $10 million is basically 2/3 of the annual budget. That's a hell of a reserve by any
I'd like
standard.
to just make a clarification. When we were involved in a fund balance policy conversation a year and a half ago, whatever that was, we did have staff pull together several examples of fund balance policies from other districts. They're not exceptional. Maybe you're trying to make a different point, but I don't want to mislead anybody. There are fund balance policies out there to be had from other similar districts.
Yeah, well, that's the problem. They're very vague. They're very vague, and they're pulling numbers out of their year.
And I don't disagree with you, but we've been hand-wringing this since I became involved in this a year ago. With interest rates, the long-term interest rates went down 1 point in the last 2 months. The longer we wait, the more risk we take with our taxpayers' funds. I think we have to be responsible, as you suggest. I just want it to get done in the next month or so. I can wait a month. I don't want to wait 6 months. I don't want to be sitting, may I finish, please? I don't want to be sitting here a year from now saying, gee, I wish I had done that last year, like I'm saying today, I wish I had done this a year ago. So I just think we need to get a date down when we can look at whatever we need to look at, be willing to do that, certainly, we need to do that, and make a decision. Let's just get off our butts and make a decision.
I would agree that I think most people agree that a decision does need to be made. That's not the issue. It's just that let's make a decision with all the cards on the
Absolutely.
table.
No question.
And BLDD is a significant card when you're talking about a school that was built in 1960.
Well, we have, let's stay over there, the BLD.
But that's not really the crucial part of the study. The
So
crucial
when
part is going to be
are we
coming.
going to get the crucial part?
I would like to hand the mic to the gentleman in the blue shirt who I don't know your name. I'm sorry. If you can state your name and say where you're at.
Hi, Craig Hopkins, 300 West Prospect.
Go.
Good. My question can come after this because it's slightly different. The question I mainly wanted to dig into is the difference between option 1 and option 2. It sounds like option 3 is not what you're looking at. In terms of the real benefit, so you can't actually pay off the bonds until 2018, but you're talking to the side. So is the real benefit the interest rate that you're getting in the escrow versus what you're getting in a bank account? And do you have I guess you do have a risk there, right? If interest rates rise in the short term, let's just say you're getting 1.2 in 5-year treasuries versus 10 basis points or something in a northern account. But let's just say that 6 months down the road or a year down the road, interest rates have risen 1%, then you do have a significant risk in terms of what you're earning on that 5.2 million. Even though you're waiting and you're losing money in the short term, in the long term, that might end up benefiting. And so I kind of want to understand if there's also benefit. I mean, if you know that.
Could you hold the mic up?
I'm sorry.
Okay, sorry.
So I do understand the idea that the first chance you can pay them off at 2018, you want to reduce the debt, and that makes perfect sense. But I just want to get a better understanding of is the reason you do it today versus 6 months or a year from now because the interest rate that you're getting on it currently versus in the escrow account, and what is the risk that interest rates rise and a year from now that's a significantly higher rate? And I haven't done the math, but if you were to look at it, let's just say $25,000 of fees versus doing it in pieces, you might be looking at a potentially bigger savings depending on how much interest rates were to change, over that 5-year block.
Well, I think what you're talking about is like the opportunity cost of if we do it now at kind of these low interest rates, although interest rates have gone up significantly since May, but they're supposed to go up more. So if we wait a couple of years, we could get a higher interest rate, and that's true. We also, though, there's 2 years of interest that we didn't pay off, so that's kind of a missed opportunity there. I mean, you could get a higher interest rate and help you on the defeasance. If you go to option 2 that's got a bond component, you want the rates to be low on the bond component, right? So, it's all about future interest rates. If we knew exactly what they were going to be, we could certainly, with certainty make some decisions. But given that we don't, these options are to accomplish the goal that the board kind of set me forth on, which was find a way to level our debt payments, okay? So they don't go up to kind of the high rates that they're planning to go to.
But just kind of to clarify on that, do I have this right? So let's say we agree that in 2018 you're going to move $5.23 million and pay off the bonds, right? So let's just say that that's a set factor. So is the real difference in savings between doing this now versus another point in time, the difference in interest rate you're earning on that 5.23 over that period of time? Do I have that?
That's one difference.
Okay.
But if you notice on like this chart for option 1, you see the negative numbers. That's like $400,000 or $500,000 reduction in taxes for the next 5 years up to 2018. Okay, so by doing it now, we're going to start reducing taxes right away. If we wait till 2018 and keep our money, at the Northern Trust, we're still going to earn interest, and when they have the opportunity, as rates go up, to get higher interest rates on our money, and then do it in 2018, we can do that, but we won't have the savings in the next, the near term 15, 16, 17. Does that make sense at all?
Well, it does, but what is that savings? Is that interest rate, or is it?
That savings is interest costs on the bonds that we're defeasing that we don't have to pay now because we've set that escrow up.
Okay, thank you. That's
Does that make sense? Okay.
Dave, do you have a question? Microphone.
Yeah, I guess my question is it a given that in 2018 it's predetermined that we want to pay off the bonds and refinance? Because it's conceivable that interest rates would be significantly more than they are today.
No, because we
it would
refinance.
cost us more if we were to refinance.
Well, we're not refinancing in these scenarios.
what we're doing is defeasing, meaning we're not issuing new bonds. Mostly, we're taking our own money, our 5.23 that's in our bank account, and we're using it to pay off bonds. So that doesn't matter. We still have our cash, and hopefully we've earned a little more interest on it, okay? In option 2, we have a very small bond issue, okay? So if we wait, we do have interest rate risk on that small bond issue. So, I mean, it's there, but that small bond issue is very short. It's only 5 years. And that short end of the yield curve is where interest rates are the lowest. So the risk is a little bit less than if we were to do an option 3 with long dated bonds.
Is there any way for you to pull out your crystal ball and give us the estimate of costs? What do we stand to lose on refunding 1.43 million by waiting, let's say it takes 3 months?
End of September. If
To-
you're waiting for the BOD
And then
report.
give us a week or two to have a conversation. Let's say we made this decision.
I'll just
in
tell
October.
them.
Is it significant?
No, that's not a big deal. If we get it by the end of September, that's great.
The other thing that we can get you in almost all entirety is the strategic plan. Don't forget I sent you the unedited version, so you
Because I
at
think-
least got a feel
Me
for it.
personally, I think I can support option 2 if we can wait till end of September, early October.
I think we need to
have
wait.
a more detailed
Yeah, we
conversation.
need to have an understanding of what these incremental expenses might be. We need to wait. We need to evaluate that, so I can buy into that.
That and also an understanding of the abatement, because I do think the problem with option 2 is that increase in the tax bill. And if there's something that can be done to mitigate that, I'd like to have that
Like
explored.
a $400,000 abatement on it.
Yeah.
Okay.
So is everybody on the board that
Yeah.
comfortable if we make a decision about this in October when we have this other data available?
Susan
Is
or
that
Rich,
okay with everyone?
what do you guys think? We're trying to, want to give Gene some guidance now. And for the most part, I'm hearing a lot of consensus that option 2 sounds like it's probably one that there's going to be some support behind, but we need to hear about this, the completion of the study from BLDD first,
Yes.
and maybe learn a little bit more about defeasing an additional chunk of money.
Abating.
Abating an additional chunk of money, like
Right,
$400,000.
right, to.
Are you guys think that that's the right way to move ahead, or where are we
I
at?
think that's fine. I'd also like to see what would happen if we transferred fund balance down to 50%.
And to that point, I think we need at some point to have a discussion as a board about what our reserve policy is going to be.
We do.
I mean, we could probably even schedule that conversation to happen
Prior.
while we're waiting. 'Cause
Right.
I think we've had, it's back and forth, and I suspect it wouldn't be a very long conversation at this point.
We could, in the September committee of the whole, we could finish up questions on the budget because we'll be discussing that from next week through September, end of September. And then we could have the reserve policy discussion that night.
Which, Gina, I want to add, in October is when we really need to start talking about this next levy.
Right.
And that's going to fold into all of these
But once we get
discussions.
that,
Doesn't it kind of do, if we establish our reserve policy and we have a pretty
Yeah,
good
that's
idea what we're doing with
It'll fall into
this
place.
budget, that's it.
budget, then I think the levy is probably not going to be a big hurdle.
Okay.
So,
It's
to Rich's point about the 60%, or maybe we ought to look at 50%, I think adding that $400,000 abatement in that year where we saw a bump in option 2
2014.
brings that number down, right? The abatement
By
comes out
400,
of
right.
reserves.
Right.
By 400 grand, so that may get us closer to the 50, just to acknowledge your concern, whether that's where we want to go or not. Jane, this data I find very useful on the fund reserve discussion.
But it's-
Reserve fund discussion. Reserve fund discussion.
Oh.
This is, but it's fiscal year 2011 data.
Yeah.
I assume that the committee that had this discussion about fund reserves had data like this in front of them.
No, I don't believe they did. For strategic planning, no, they didn't, they did not.
That, to me, that tells me more than really a lot of averages. No offense, I don't blame you for taking that approach, right? Like, what else do you do, right? But this data from 2011 seems highly
Those are
relevant. What it
your-
shows is that we were smack in the middle.
Those are your NSSCD member districts.
So the districts that are, I think, fairly comparable to us, right, or no?
Yeah, and you'd
Well,
have
but you
higher.
don't know what they anticipate coming down the
Oh,
pipe.
I
You see
agree,
what I'm saying?
I agree, it's not
Gives you some frame of
the gold
reference.
standard, it just gives you some frame of
Yeah.
reference other than averages of, 10 members of the community, which I don't mean to scoff at, I think that's as good a guidepost as you can get. But I wonder if we have more recent data in this, this is 2011? We have 2012 yet, or no?
No.
Okay.
We just make an SSED put
You
that
can
together.
probably call them.
Yes, we can, but I'm not gonna call any of my business manager peers right now this week when everybody's trying to get ready for
This
school.
is the first week
I'm
of school
sorry.
for all of us.
It is not a good time.
And I
That's
don't-
certainly something we can
We're
put on our
talking-
plate into the future.
Why not?
And I think I think it would be useful, before we talk about the fund balance policy, and I know you guys are busy, but if there's a recommendation from administration about, we've talked about either having a global fund balance policy, or is it by fund? In other words, do you need a different fund balance for transportation than you do for education?
That was the question I had. Can you move from reserving transportation to move in education or vice versa?
I'm suggesting that you give us, if you have a recommendation, like we think you need to have, more of a 50 or 60% in education, but probably only need a 10% or 30% in transportation, whatever that is, if you have that
But
recommendation.
education being 80%, that's what I'm saying.
The other thing I will do for all of you is I have the packet that we had, the fund balance policies that we pulled. Don't get all excited about them
Yeah,
because
because there's nothing.
there's nothing substantial,
'Cause they-
but you can see what's in them. So
What would be of use for me, because I have a very difficult time understanding what we would use the fund in the reserve for. So I need some what-if scenario. You see what I'm saying? Like,
Yes, I agree. Why do we want to have our hands tied to a fund balance policy if we have an opportunity to save some money?
correct. So what is the, or what is,
Without hurting the education.
what is the best way to use this funding? You see what I'm saying? So I do not know, I don't know what is anticipated, and I think that a lot of people think that the reserve is like saving some money so we can do, $15 million worth of work on the middle school, which I think would be better off funded from a taxation point of view. You see what I'm saying? So, but if somebody says, well, we need a new science lab, and that's going to be this, then for sure that should come out of the reserve. You see
So
what I'm
you
saying?
just want to know different scenarios or
Yes.
possibilities of why we would have to dip into reserves.
Right, so, like at the village, I can tell you that, well, the measuring device and the water tower are costing 75 and they have a life expectancy of 10 years and they're going, we're going to need to replace them. So I know that's going to be used for that particular purpose. You see what I'm saying? Or I know that we anticipate a drop in revenue for whatever reason. So I want those what-if scenario because I think that once we have this what-if scenario, then if we're really careful, we're going to anticipate everything, and then we're going to come up with a raw number that we can, in turns, compare to the budget, and that's going to give us a percentage.
And furthermore, some of this, as I said earlier, some of these expenses should be funded through the operating process. If we can anticipate it through a capital budget process or through an expense process. We've had an excess of reserve over expenses anyway, for 10 years now we have. We should be spending that money to improve whatever we need to improve at the science lab level or wherever, out of the expenses. That's the way I think we should.
Right, and we can accrue a lot of this.
And we can accrue it, right.
Meaning, if we know that we have something to do in 3 years, then we can accrue, let's say it's going to be 750 grand, then we accrue X amount of dollar every year, and then when we need to pull the plug.
You can, depending on what you do with the 2013 levy.
Well, yeah, but that is.
That's going to be a big piece.
That's gonna set
The levy,
the path
you have the CPI, so, what's the difference?
I think, but
what are you going to gain?
If you're talking about living to the maximum allowed by PTEL, or you're talking about budgeting strategically based on projected expenditures.
Well, budgeting strategically based on expenditure, I mean, the way I think of it means that we accrue for replacement cost. You see what I'm saying? That's the basis, okay? So we may have some years a reserve that goes to, 80%, but we know that, because we thought about it, that in 2015, we're gonna take it back down to 40% because we're gonna do this major investment in science lab or,
So we're
math
really
lab.
talking about a range.
Yes,
And it will vary from year to year.
It's reasonable, we just need to spell it out in policy.
Right.
so.
yes.
Yeah.
And if it's gonna be hard to make it clear, but that would be good. So, takeaway from the meeting is that we would like to ask Jean to move ahead with looking more in depth at option 2. We would like to get the next phase, the BLDD report in our hand prior to the next discussion of this.
And strategic plan changes.
Yeah, and we want to consider an abatement of $400,000, and we want to look at a 50% reserve.
Is
So-
also, I would like staff recommendation on the BDL study. In other words, life is a matter of choice, you know what I'm saying? So BDL is gonna have, as Neil said, an exhaustive list. And I'd like the principal, everybody on staff to say, yeah, this we absolutely need. This is number 1, number 2, number
Needs
3
versus
as,
wants, that kind of thing.
right, like,
Well, some of it
my
you're never
house
gonna
on a
do.
fireplace and,
Some of it you're never gonna do. The 100-year rebuilding the foundation, we're not gonna do. Some
No,
of
but I'm
it,
interested
some of it,
no, I'm more interested in curriculum elements than brick and mortar.
So when we get the next BLDD report, it comes with something from the administration and the teachers.
Well,
as
they
to
can
what
also
they
give
really
their-
want to be
their-
like.
I was responding to the report that we got so far and thinking that you would do some work with it, because there were things on there that were talked about as a 10-year horizon that I couldn't imagine letting go for a year, like paint peeling in the gym or something. I don't understand why you'd let that go for 12 years, but
No, they say the paint is gonna peel.
Part of the problem is they're not here to present the information.
Right.
We're left to our own devices here.
right.
But they're,
Chipping or something.
yeah, and we're gonna take care of those things.
Yeah.
But for instance, one of the items is
Right.
replacing all the doors in the middle school. Yeah, they need to be replaced. They're saying, we can always defer certain things. So even they say, 2018, this is probably going to need replacing. Many things can be deferred.
Or
Or some things that happen.
Or accelerated,
Exactly.
or not done at all because we're gonna do new school.
These are based on formulas of useful life for those particular mechanicals or
So
finishes.
that's all, that makes sense. So in addition to following up, we're gonna also schedule a discussion on fund balance policy.
I'm gonna put
In
that in the
September.
September committee of the whole.
We're gonna, as part of that, we're gonna have a look again at what other districts are doing, both in terms of their written policy and their reserve amounts, right? And Christine made the point of, it'd be nice to see some scenarios of how reserves are put to use.
How we get different things. I see that.
Is this conversation played out? Is there more to have on bonds and reserves?
No.
Thank you very, very much.
Are you guys okay back there?
Okay, well, let's all offer the opportunity. If anybody wants to say anything else to the board, please.
Then we have to make sure we would cancel Thursday's meeting.
Someone
so we
back there
know
has
that
a
for
hand
sure.
Wait, microphone.
Microphone.
State your name and address too, please.
Hi, my name is Marcy Kowalski, 1013 Campbell Court. I just want to clarify, when you look at the other districts, are we going to align ourselves with other North Shore districts, correct?
That's
This
a
is-
staff decision.
And we need also to know the logic behind the reserve, because.
Exactly,
Because, a percentage means nothing. If you're a large district, probably your reserve is gonna be smaller in percentage than if you're a small district. And if there is any particular reason for the reserve to be where it is at, could they tell us so we know the reason for that small reserve or that large reserve?
Right, and their past performance as to where they stand now based on what they've done. Okay.
Anybody else? Jane, you have something to say? Thank you.
I think I would just like to kind of wrap up by saying, it sounds to me like you have a lot of commonalities in your thinking, and I think I'm gonna speak for Jane and I in saying that the timeline is perfect in here because we can get to you these items for further thought, the BLDD study, the additional BLDD study, the strategic plan, some possibilities of using our reserves. We're talking about budgeting while we're doing all of that. We will be bringing this back to the table so we can make a final decision. And that's right at the same time we're doing the levy. So everything overlaps. The timing is right for all of the discussion, so it should just play right out.
Okay.
And certainly if there's anything else that you need, make sure that you let us know. We'll do our best. The only thing Jane and I both would like to do is get our children back in school happily and safely and see them learning, and then we can start emailing our friends and saying, help us.
Yeah. Does anybody else have anything else they'd like to raise, questions? Can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Have a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? I think the motion passed, we're adjourned. And, we didn't cancel Thursday.
We do not need Thursday's meeting, so we'll just, I'll take, I already got a text that Liz jumping in.
Is this